Welcome back to Punk Rock Theologian. As we continue through the book, we come to a very unique story. The day when Jesus fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish is the only miracle that's recorded in all 4 Gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all describe the apostles basically advising Jesus to send this crowd away so that they can go get something to eat. Because the scene was set that we're in a very remote place. Jesus and his apostles came here on purpose to get away from the crowd, and the crowd followed them there anyway. Probably the most memorable thing is this idea of 5,000 people. A lot of our modern translations point out the idea that it's not just men in the crowd, but it's the women and children, it's their families with them. If you assume that they average one wife and child per man, you're up to 15,000 already. Undoubtedly, some didn't have that, but some had way more, so it's more likely to be in the 20 to 25,000 kind of a range. The best way I put this in perspective as a concert lover is don't imagine the small crowd in front of a band shell that can be 100 and a few thousand people even in a big park, but this is a full stadium. This is a monstrous crowd. John has a tendency to include personal details that the other ones don't. Like this bit starting at verse 5. Jesus soon saw a huge crowd of people coming to look for him. Turning to Philip, he asked, "Where can we buy bread to feed all these people?" He was testing Philip, for he already knew what he was going to do. Philip replied, "Even if we worked for months, we wouldn't have enough money to feed them." In the Greek, that specifically points out that it would take 200 days' wages to buy enough bread to give each person one bite. This is stressing the magnitude of the crowd and the inadequacy of their resources. Then John continues, "Then Andrew, Simon's brother, spoke up. There's a young boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what good is that with this huge crowd?" Everybody includes the detail of 5 loaves and 2 fish. John's the only one who says that Andrew found a little boy that has it. I love that he comes and says, look, this is clearly not enough, but here's what we got. So then the story goes that Jesus multiplies this food for this enormous crowd. Everybody tells it about the same. I'll give it to you from Luke, starting at verse 16. Then Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, looked up toward heaven and blessed them. Then, breaking the loaves into pieces, he kept giving the bread and fish to the disciples so they could distribute it to the people. It's a very interesting detail of this to me that no one really gives much detail. Everybody thought this story was important to tell, and nobody thought the mechanics mattered to the story. That tells us that that stuff clearly isn't the point. It's not really about the food. And a couple of the last details that everybody includes. You see in Matthew 14:20, they all ate as much as they wanted, and afterward the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftovers. See the same way in Mark, but it's they all ate as much as they wanted. That's a big deal. The Greek term here says that they were stuffed, they gorged themselves. This is like Thanksgiving dinner level full. These people ate as much as they possibly could, and I'm willing to bet they were stuffing their pockets and taking home their own leftovers, but there was still so much, lavishly more than enough, that the disciples gathered up leftovers. Continue and we'll see it again in Luke. The disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftovers. So Jesus went so far above and beyond. It's not just giving everybody one bite like the disciples said they couldn't manage to do. He didn't just give everybody enough. He gave everybody more than enough, let them get completely stuffed, and then had leftovers, so each one of the apostles ends up with a takeout package that's probably more than they began with in the first place. And I believe that that over the top is the point of this story. Matthew and Mark both tell about another time that Jesus does almost the same thing. It's 4,000 men, so a little bit smaller crowd, and he's got 7 loaves of bread this time, so it's a slightly larger sack lunch. The numbers still don't remotely work out, but it's the same deal. He feeds the whole crowd, and the disciples take away leftovers. But then later on, he points back to this story. In Matthew 16, Jesus is warning his disciples about something very important. I'll give you the whole thing, starting at verse 6. "Watch out," Jesus warned them. "Beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." At this, they began to argue with each other because they hadn't brought any bread. Jesus knew what they were saying, so he said, "You have so little faith. Why are you arguing with each other about having no bread? Don't you understand even yet? Don't you remember the 5,000 I fed with 5 loaves and the baskets of leftovers you picked up? Or the 4,000 I fed with 7 loaves and the large baskets of leftovers you picked up? Why can't you understand that I'm not talking about bread? So again I say, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." Then at last they understood that he wasn't speaking about the yeast in bread, but about the deceptive teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Now, I don't think that this feeding 5,000 or 4,000 has much to do with the Pharisees and Sadducees, but it does have a lot to do with, I'm not talking about bread. These stories showed that provisions, resources, are not a concern to Jesus. He can make the smallest thing more than enough. It's kind kind of his favorite thing to do. He loves taking not enough and making it so far over the top that you end up with leftovers that were more than you started out with in the first place. That's the point of this story. That's why he even went back to his disciples and he was like, do you still not get this? You watched me do this. You know that I can make any little bit enough. Stop worrying about that. We have more important things to focus on, and we still do today. Jesus wants to save the world, and he's called us to be a part of it. If there's stuff that you don't know how it's going to work, don't sit there trying to make it all work before you go do it. He never expected you to solve all the details. We need to step out in faith and trust him that he can cover all the details. He can do it with loaves and fish. He can still do it today. It's just a question of if we actually believe him.